Reddit's Let's Not Meet forum is a popular place for people to come together and tell their terrifying, supposedly true stories about people they'd rather not meet again, hence the name. From stalker boyfriends to racist hillbillies, we will be going through 4 terrifyingly, supposedly true Let's Not Meet stories. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the horror. Our first story comes from Reddit user My Patronus is an Impala, who had a truly terrifying run-in with a racist local from the bayous of Louisiana.
So, I am a convert to Islam. I was raised Southern Baptist, but decided it wasn't for me. So, I understand people around me. What I don't understand and have a hard time with is how differently I was treated once people could see I was outwardly Muslim. I made the choice to wear the hijab and have never regretted it, but I have questioned the safety of living in the deep, deep South, the bayous of Louisiana. It hurt to have these people, my people, to suddenly see me as an enemy. I was 22 at this point. At the time this takes place, my husband, a transplant from New Jersey, and I were living in a large city in Louisiana, though I traveled the 2 hours to see my family down south quite a bit. While driving home from a weekend visit, I realized I needed to fuel up and stopped at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. I've been there before. It's your typical mom and pop convenience gas station. I get out of the car and pay at the pump. It is at this point that my 2-year-old asks me for chips. I decide it would be a nice treat for her and head inside to get it. As I'm waiting in line, I notice this guy staring at me. I mean, staring hard. At first, I thought I had something in my teeth. Why else would this dude be straight up mean mugging me? Most times I don't realize, hey chick, you look like a foreigner despite the blue eyes. He looks like a typical Cajun, we all call them coonasses, term of endearment, wearing a bandana hat, fishing boots, dirty jeans, and a cut-off white shirt. Basically, he looked like a fisherman. He continues staring, and honestly, it doesn't get to me because I'm used to it at this point. I look different. I get it. I just let it go. I've had this happen to me before. It's part of living in Cajun country. But this guy takes it a step further. He starts yelling at me to go back where I came from, that I'm a plague on this country and deserve to die. Mind you, I was born and raised in a tiny town in South Louisiana that's not even on some maps. I'm full-on Cajun, French blood and all. Now, I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable and don't want to make the situation worse, but also cannot stand here and allow someone to harass me like that, so I just say, I'm sorry you feel that way, sir. If you would like to talk, you can learn about what I actually believe versus what the media tells you. I respect your opinion, but I would appreciate it if you could stop yelling at me. People are looking around uneasily, but stay out of it. Now this guy goes absolutely apeshit. I mean, he just starts yelling and screaming, calling me Satan, terrorist, sand, N-word, and all kinds of other things. Mind you, I'm white as they come. I cannot find makeup light enough for me, so the last comment was just stupid. At this time, people around us are dumbfounded, but apparently too scared to say anything. So I decided my best course of action is to ignore him, get my stuff, and go. It looked as if the clerk wanted to apologize to me, but was unsure of how to go about it. Now, he was ahead of me in line, so he left the store before me. He didn't leave the gas station, though. He stayed and scouted me for a while. He stayed in his car, staring, waiting for me to leave. I was uneasy, but honestly most of these guys are all talk, so I figured I would be okay. Once I was done, I went to my car, gave my daughter her chips, and we head out on our journey home. This guy waits until I leaves, then pulls out behind me. At this point, I'm freaked out, but hoping he's just going the same way I am. I mean, he couldn't possibly come after me to do God knows what in broad daylight, right? I also had 2 hours to get home, so I figured he wouldn't follow me all the way there. What I didn't take into account is that these guys feel entitled. Entitled to make the world a better place by ridding it of scum. He didn't see anything wrong with his actions. This crazy person decides to make his move and run me off the road with my fucking 2-year-old in the car. 2-year-old! He keeps pushing my bumper to get me into a ditch. I'm trying to stay on the road and not flip over and figure out a course of action when, thank God, I see a cop car parked on the shoulder ahead of us. As soon as this asshole sees it, he immediately slows down and changes lanes. I slow down and pull over in front of the cop. The guy keeps going. My adrenaline is too high and Mama Bear came out, so I don't even think about getting a license plate number. I get out of the car to tell the cop what happened, and this jackass pulls a fucking gun on me, telling me not to get any closer. Okay, cool. I could be anyone. I stop, do as he says. Hands on the head, the whole bit. All the while, frustrated, the guy is getting away. After I get everything straightened out with the cop and explained what transpired, guess what the guy said? What did you expect looking like that? I'm just absolutely flabbergasted. What? A piece of fabric on my head warrants a death sentence? I was so upset I just thanked him for his time and went on my way. I never asked for his name or badge number and just let it go, fearing more backlash should I report this. I was since decided, 7 years and several incidents later, to stop wearing the hijab. Honestly, it hurts. I would absolutely love to wear it again, but I refuse to put my children in danger because of it. Thankfully, in Islam, we are not required to cover ourselves if we are concerned for our safety. So, asshole who decided to try to kill a young mother for a piece of cloth on her head, and jackass cop who didn't do shit? Let's not meet again.
User RejoyBVanon99I shows us that just because you've known someone for years doesn't mean you actually know who they are.
This is a story about a friend and roommate I used to have who I blocked out of my life. I've known him for about 3 years. I have to start from the top to really explain what a sick and mentally ill man he is. I was a bit of a stoner a few years ago. My girlfriend had recently broken up with me and all I wanted to do was self-medicate to forget her. Me and my cousin were out looking for weed one night. That's how we met Joey. Joey was 4 years older than the both of us, and he dressed like a typical kid who wanted to be ghetto or gangster looking. He stood about 6'5" and weighed 240 pounds. He was a massive hulk of a man. His personality at the time seemed like a big friendly dog, a bit dumb, but funny and kind nevertheless. So we both let it slide. He was a hardcore stoner and collected numerous exotic pets, like snakes and such. Although, something was off about the way he dressed. He'd match his do-rag to his sneakers and t-shirt to his pants, which was a bit funny. There's not many gangs in my area, but I would imagine with his all-red or all-yellow outfits with bandanas on, he'd attract unwanted attention elsewhere. If Joey was anything, he was a storyteller. He had a story about everything. Usually, it was a subtle or not so subtle brag story. He was definitely loud and a motor mouth. I usually just ignored him when he annoyed me or went home. My cousin had moved back home to work and I stayed behind, so me and Joey quickly became pretty good friends, as I had no one else besides Joey and his roommates. Fast forward a few months and Joey appears to be the ladies' man sort of guy. An influx of women always passed through. Oddly enough, they were all usually single mothers or way older than him. I just left it, but now, after knowing him in retrospect, I'd say that's a part of his mental illness and how he portrays himself to desperate women. Joey moves away for a few months, but eventually moves back home. And he gets a new girlfriend, Tara, in the same week he moved back. Tara is a pretty normal college student and definitely not his usual overweight single mom type. One thing I learned was Joey portrayed himself as a sort of feminist and knight in shining armor to women, writing them poetry and such. What happened over the next 2 years revealed a dark side of Joey I never thought he had, and one I'm finally glad to be free from. It was absolutely terrifying, and while I chastise myself now for sticking around, I've had many abusive relationships as the victim, and I just grow so used to it, unfortunately. I do blame myself for a lot of what transpired. Anyways, to continue with the story, I moved in with them and another couple. I felt like, why not move in with my best friend? He's a bit annoying sometimes, but everyone has their faults. I'm sure I'm annoying to other people at times. As if some switch flicked on in Joey's very core, he became angry and explosive about the slightest thing going wrong, always threatening to violently attack other people and bad-mouthing me to his girlfriend and other roommates. One night I accidentally knocked over his weed off his dresser onto the floor, and to my surprise, he slaps me for it. I'm shocked, and I move out a few weeks later. I decide I'm never going to live with that guy again. I move out, and slowly, Joey tries to get on my good side again, and keeps saying he was abused by his ex-girlfriend when he moved away, and that the other roommate stole from him and his girlfriend Tara, so he was just in a volatile mood after everything went wrong. Being a naive, forgiving type, I accept his apology. And for the first few months we hang out, he's generally okay in small doses. However, a few months later, I had to move out of my apartment and I was flat broke. So, Joey offers again to give me a place to stay until I get back on my feet. I accept, having nowhere else to go, and they move all my things in for me. It's only a few weeks later, and Joey is worse than he has ever been. He beats his girlfriend's dog brutally. The police are called, but since the dog is the typical dumb-loving lug type, he runs to Joey all happy and playful. The police don't believe it, so they leave. Joey begins to hoard cats, like almost a dozen cats. He used to hoard reptiles in the same way, but he neglects them and lets them die. He's fairly neglectful and abusive of his cats as well. He never gives them clean water, just leaves the toilet up, and he hardly ever changes their litter boxes. The smell becomes unbearable. Joey starts to break and throw things around the house. I usually lock myself in the room and let it unfold, scared to death with 911 dialed on my cell phone. One day he pushes his girlfriend down onto the floor. They make up, so I feel like if I call the police, they'll not believe me. He starts verbally abusing her about college, about sleeping with guys before they met, and one of them was a black guy. Joey becomes openly racist and calls black people he sees on the street monkeys and acts rude to them. I'm surprised he never got beat up for it. They break up a few weeks later, and I plan on getting the hell out of there as well, but secretly, as I don't want to deal with his bullshit. He explodes one night, and I finally have the balls to say that you lay one finger on me, and I'm calling the police. Leave me the hell alone. He goes back to trying to be a sentimental romantic guy to win her back, but he doesn't want any of it. He eventually explodes and calls her a dirty whore. He dates her a few different girls, but they find out he's just using them for money or marijuana. He puts a lot of weird and desperate statuses on Facebook and writes his poems again. His poems are all pretty much, I loved you then, you left me, and I wanted to die. I find a new place, and in the weeks before I move, that's when I learn something more disturbing about Joey than him just being an abusive asshole. One night, Joey isn't anywhere to be found. Good, I think. I get a phone call a few days later at 6 in the morning. Apparently, Joey had exposed himself to a 15-year-old girl, even though he was nearing 30. And he sent her pictures of his erect penis. Her parents had called the police on him. I pretend to care, then hang up and report it to the police as well. A day or so later, he comes home and starts moving out. He tells me that this isn't the first time this has happened, and he likes to take out young girls to get ice cream and such. Sometimes he would point out little girls and say that they were attractive, and I thought all this time he just had a sick sense of humor. I block him on social media and his phone number, and I tell him I'm moving to a fake street address so he doesn't bother me. It's been a month or so and I haven't heard back from him. I hope the police charge him with luring. So, ex-best friend, let's never meet again.
Baby Angel 242 shows us that talking to strangers online can leave you with a life of regret, with our third story of the evening.
People seem to like my last post about my neighbors, so I thought I would make another one about a more recent experience. At the age of maybe around 14, 15, I just discovered a website named Ask.fm, if any of you remember that. If not, it is a website that allows anonymous people to send you questions which you can then answer publicly. I use it mainly to send my friends dumb questions about boys in school. For months, it was all fine and fun to us. I remember being on Skype with my best friend at the time, Liv, when I received a question telling me exactly what I was doing and wearing at that exact moment. Naturally, I thought it was Liv messing with me, so I confronted her about it. She claimed that she didn't do it, but, of course, I didn't believe her and naively assumed she was just trying to scare me. A few weeks went by, and by then, Ask.fm had been mostly ignored. People had started to move on to other apps and websites. On a whim, I decided to check my questions and found a bombardment of questions from an anonymous person who called himself Sean, again detailing what I'd been doing and wearing on certain days. At this point, I started to panic. I didn't tell anybody, however, as I was a complete and utter idiot. I started being more aware of when I was out, checking for cars following me and trying to remember faces of passing people. Nothing ever seemed familiar. This continued for months without another question, and I once again assumed it was just a joke from a friend. Around 6 months later, I was out walking in the small forest with Liv, who I had assumed was behind it all. It was midwinter and around 5 p.m., so it was already dark out. As we were walking back home, as she lived next door to me, I heard someone shout my name at the top of their lungs. Naturally, we ran back to our houses as quick as we could. I could have sworn I saw a man dressed in black running the opposite direction. Once again, parents were not told. We thought we would get into trouble. The very next day, I got home from school and saw that my bedroom had been trashed. The only things missing were several sets of my underwear and a few pairs of socks. This was enough for me to tell my parents everything, and soon after, we moved. About a year ago, I was sorting through the posts and I saw a letter, no postal address, just a piece of paper that said, "I miss you, Sean, XX." So, Sean, leave me alone.
Our final story comes from Dragonfire73, who recounts a hard time in their life as they try to keep control in a manipulative relationship.
When I was younger, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at 14. It was very difficult for me to socialize with people in person, so I turned to the internet. There, I stumbled into the world of type-based roleplay. It became my passion, and even set me into the path towards becoming the artist I am today. My original interest was Dragon Age, and I joined an RP group on DeviantArt, TMM. I loved that group, and spent all my time in the IRC chat, which naturally led to a decline in my grades. But I met Michael after I gained a bit of an interest in Slenderman. I had stumbled across the blog space RP world of Slender blogging, and followed as many as I could, dedicated a Gmail to it, and dived in, creating my own Slender blog. I played a character that was basically myself, even sharing my own name. I would even frequently post little videos of myself running through the woods, or even just talking to the camera. Michael was another player, and his character was on the enemy team. You see, I played what was known as a runner, or someone who was fleeing from the eldritch horror, and he was a proxy, which is a servant of Slender Man. The kicker was that he was more than just a grunt, and was basically one of Slender Man's elite soldiers. Regardless, we ended up chatting over email, but he never broke character, so I didn't either. We continued to play with each other for over a year and a half before I ended up breaking character to another player, who was friends with Michael as well. He, of course, immediately told Michael, "Oh my god, she's not insane," as we all kind of thought everyone else actually thought this stuff was real. So Michael messaged me, excitedly announcing that I wasn't insane. We quickly became pretty close personal friends, and referred to that moment as the best moment in RP history for most of the time we knew each other. We talked on an almost daily basis, and he always seemed to go out of his way to match my schedule, even though he lived 2 hours behind me. And I was a 15-year-old high school student by this point, so I was getting up at 5:30 every morning to go to school. He was pretty honest with his age, and being mature for my age, it didn't bother me that he was 19, almost 20, and I was 15. It was pretty close to the end of the year when we started talking out of character, so summer break came quickly. That just opened the door to us talking all the time. I remember one night he convinced me to stay up and video chat with him for the first time. I'd never actually seen his face before, and I was ecstatic. I hid in my closet and we talked all night. My dad busted in at 4 in the morning and confiscated my computer, which I was not allowed to have in my room at night after that point. But I just ended up giving Michael my phone number and we grew closer. Later, while I was spending some time at a friend's house, I told him I didn't think he was capable of surprising me, and he responded by asking me out. Being a 15-year-old girl, I was ecstatic, but reluctant. My friend did well to ground me and think it through, and he'd been nothing if not a gentleman to me. So after a 45-minute walk with my friend, I called him and ecstatically told him yes. He had, during that time, sent me so many texts expressing his concern that he'd upset me. I'd ended up apologizing profusely for making him wait. The first few months were amazing. We were so close and talked every night on the phone, even sleeping while still on a call. I fortunately had unlimited text and call. But it got weird once the school year started back up. Over the summer, I'd been able to dedicate pretty much all of my time to him, and with school, it would limit the time we could talk to each other quite a bit. It didn't occur to me at all that talking to someone for near on 18 hours a day was an unhealthy dependency issue. So, we had our first argument about texting. He wanted me to text him whenever I wasn't able to call him, but I wasn't allowed to text in class. We came up to a compromise when I told him that I would text him between classes and call him at lunch. I didn't really have any friends at the school, as I was a bit of a recluse, and the ones I did have didn't share my lunch period, so it didn't affect my social life all that much. It went well for a while until I ran into an old friend of mine from middle school, who happened to be a guy. I'd always gotten along with guys better than girls, but Michael freaked out. I had been on the phone when it happened, and had brushed Michael off to talk to him. After my friend and I parted ways, I was harshly told off and told that I couldn't talk to other guys. I was completely shocked and tried to explain that the guy had been a friend of mine. Michael had then a complete breakdown and told me that his ex had cheated on him and that he couldn't trust any other guy to behave around me. He was terrified that I'd be stolen. He even cried. I was upset, but I agreed to mollify him and began to avoid my male friends whenever I was on the phone, which was a lot. Quickly, schoolwork got pretty heavy, and it would take me longer and longer to call him after school. He began accusing me of not loving him enough to talk to him, and claimed that he never had enough time with me. He gave me the option of texting him in class, or calling him as soon as I got home from school. I went with the latter, which completely cut off any time I spent with my family, save for a brief dinner, after which I immediately returned to my room. Things only escalated from there. I would get held after class for falling asleep because he kept me all night, and he would explode at me for not contacting him the moment the bell was scheduled to ring. He had a written copy of my exact schedule to the minute, and any deviation would freak him out. I began pushing away all of my friends, as he didn't approve of any of them. He even claimed that a particular friend was the human personification of a demon that was trying to kill him. His mental state was revealed to be extremely fragile, and he told me that he had a second personality, whom was quite literally his Slender Man character named Strider. Michael spoke frequently of his constant battle to keep Strider under the surface, because while he wasn't a bad person, he was irrevocably a major douchebag. He blamed his outbursts onto this character and even texted me in italics as Strider, as if his body had been taken over for the sole purpose of belittling a 15-year-old girl over the phone. I was sympathetic, as my bipolar was at its worst, and my therapist was whispering the words schizoaffective to my mother when she thought I couldn't hear. For the next year and a half, he played me like a puppet, distancing me from my family and friends, convincing me that teachers only wanted to turn me into a mindless tool for the government, and persuading and coercing me into performing sexually for him. It felt disgusting, but he promised me that he'd marry me and we'd have beautiful children. He was frequently abusive, but he would quickly get better and suddenly everything would be perfect again, until it deteriorated into another explosive argument. Eventually, he convinced me to call the CPS on my family and report them for abuse. Now, I won't claim my family was perfect. My dad is an alcoholic, and he could get pretty violent, and he and I had vicious arguments. My mother mostly just supported whatever my dad did, and I was always incredibly resentful that she wouldn't defend me, even when my dad slapped me, kicked me out of the house barefoot, and was generally overly aggressive to me. But they did care, and my home was clean, warm, well-stocked with food. My sisters and I never really wanted for much physically, and we often got things we wanted too. The system would have destroyed my sisters, who were pretty young at the time. When my parents found out that I'd placed the call, I panicked and ran away from home, crashing at a friend's house. Michael wanted me to stay put until he could get a friend of his from Austin to come get me. But when I turned on my phone in the morning to see texts from my family, I knew that I had terrified my sisters, and the police had been called. I arranged for my dad to bring me home. I wouldn't let him pick me up from my friend's house because I knew he would threaten to sue her parents for assisting her run away. I served 6 months of juvenile probation and had to endure several meetings with a state-appointed therapist for falsely accusing my family of abuse, and my parents were subject to a second inquiry from CPS due to me running away. By the end, we were breaking up every other week and getting back together when he would send me pictures of terrible gouges on his arms, threatening to kill himself. I actively hated him by then, but still loved him and didn't want him to die. I escaped when he discovered that I'd been talking to a male friend who he particularly hated and dumped me on Valentine's Day. It took him 2 months to realize I wasn't coming back, but he would still try to text me, and I blocked so many numbers and email accounts because he would change them just to message me. It was so completely terrifying, and I was constantly terrified because he knew my address. But eventually he disappeared, and I slowly started trying to put my life back together. About a year or so ago, he texted me and I indulged him. He claimed that he'd been married. I really doubted that, despite the single picture that he sent. I asked what date his wedding had been on, But he couldn't tell me and first tried to claim that it had been in December, 2 months before he had dumped me. When I called him on it, he backpedaled and got defensive. I blocked him after that, satisfied that he was still a miserable mess that he hadn't snared another poor minor. So, Michael, let's not meet.
If you would like to read any of the stories featured on the video tonight for yourself, be sure to check out the description below. I've left links for all 4 there. And if you'd like to submit your own story that could possibly be featured in a future video, be sure to visit my website at thebringerofdarkness.weebly.com to submit a story. Thank you for joining me tonight. If you enjoyed yourself, be sure to leave a like, share the video, and possibly even consider subscribing. Stay safe out there, everyone, because we truly live in an unpredictable world.